is Tuesday. It's the 3rd of June. I'm Moon Gun-young. This is ARIRANG News live from Seoul. Our top stories today. Rival parties race across the nation on the final day of campaigning to make their closing arguments in local elections, whose outcome is increasingly looking all but certain. Samsung Everland says it'll seek an initial public offering early next year, a widely anticipated move seen as the next step in the restructuring of the family-run Samsung Group. And Washington proposes deploying an advanced missile defense system to Seoul to counter Pyongyang's weapons capabilities, says the commander of U.S. forces in South Korea. We'll have those stories and more, but first, today is the final day of campaigning for candidates running in the local elections. Less than 16 hours from now, Koreans will begin to head to some 13,000 polling stations across the nation to cast their ballots. Now, the results from tomorrow's local elections are especially important as they will be a litmus test of the Park Geun-hye administrations in the wake of last month's deadly ferry disaster. Our Park Ji-won reports.
The country's rival political parties are engaged in one final push to win the hearts of undecided voters on this Tuesday, the last day of the 13-day campaigning period. These elections are increasingly being seen as a vote of confidence for the Park Geun-hye administration, with last month's tragic ferry disaster hitting the incumbent government hard. The ruling Saenuri Party is calling on the public to give them one more chance to revamp and reform the government in the wake of the disaster.
I earnestly plead with voters to give us strength and another chance so President Park could make a new Korea. Our party, by helping the president, will build a new Korea.
The main opposition, New Politics Alliance for Democracy, is calling on voters to hold the ruling party responsible for the government's poor handling of the tragedy.
The Saenuri Party is already asking us to forget about the Seoul ferry. They asked voters to forget about it and wipe the tears of the president by helping her. We'll never forget the Seoul ferry disaster.
Over 13,000 polling stations around the nation will open at 6 a.m. on Wednesday and close at 6 p.m. More than 11% of eligible voters already cast their ballots in early voting held late last week. Experts say while the young and old vote will be split down their traditional party lines, with younger people supporting the opposition party and the older generation voting for the conservative ruling party, it's voters in their 40s who hold the key to deciding the victor in this year's local elections. Park Ji-won, ARIRANG News.
Now let's bring you up to speed on follow-up measures to last month's ferry disaster. Under the government's new government restructuring plans, more than a dozen maritime police agencies across Korea will soon be referred to as maritime safety agencies. Now, 4 others will become local maritime safety headquarters. The Ministry of Security and Public Administration says the Coast Guard's investigation and information duties will be taken over by the National Police Agency, and the National Safety Office will be in charge of surveillance, safety, and pollution prevention. President Park Geun-hye announced the dissolution of the Coast Guard 3 weeks ago on mounting criticism of the agency's first or initial response to the ferry sinking. Korea's largest conglomerate is taking another step towards restructuring, and this one is being seen as a move to speed up the succession of ownership from the group chairman to his children. Samsung Everland operates an amusement park and runs a fashion business and serves as the de facto holding company of Samsung Group, and it says it will seek an initial public offering in the first quarter of 2015. ARIRANG News Hwang Ji-hye has more.
Samsung Everland will go public by the first quarter of next year. The de facto holding company of Korea's biggest conglomerate, Samsung Group, said Tuesday that it aims to become a global fashion and service company by seeking an initial public offering. The move, however, is widely seen by analysts as the next step in the conglomerate's succession plan as it relates to Samsung Electronics chairman Lee Geun-hye's 3 children. Currently, his son Tae-yong holds the largest 25% stake in Samsung Everland, while his two daughters, Boo-jin and Seoyeon, each hold around an 8.5% stake. Chairman Lee holds a mere 3.7%. Analysts say the listing of Samsung Everland will give the chairman's children means to generate cash by selling shares in the company. The cash could be used to help pay inheritance taxes and buy shares in companies they want to control.
Samsung Group would need a lot of transaction costs in order to pay necessary taxes, in order to swap necessary stakes from one entity to the other.
Questions linger about Samsung's future as the group's de facto chairman Lee Geun-hye was hospitalized last month after suffering a heart attack. Many predict that the electronics and financial sector will be handed over to Lee's only son Tae-yong, the chemical and hotel sectors to first daughter Boo-jin, and the fashion and media sectors to second daughter Seoyeon. Samsung Everland is expected to lay out a detailed schedule and procedures for the listing later this month. Hwang Ji-hye, ARIRANG News.
LG Electronics and 3 of its affiliates have taken 12 airline companies to court over alleged price fixing. Legal analysts say the court's decision could open the door for similar lawsuits down the line. Here's our Shin Se-min with this report.
LG Group companies are seeking hundreds of thousands of dollars in compensation from a dozen domestic and foreign airline companies. The Fair Trade Commission said Tuesday that LG Electronics, LG Chem, and 2 of their affiliates filed a lawsuit against the airline companies late last year, and the case is currently being heard by the Seoul Central District Court. The 12 airline operators, including Korean Air, Asiana Airlines, Air France, and Cathay Pacific, are accused of colluding to maintain unfairly high freight transportation prices by fixing surcharges levied to make up for volatile fuel costs. The LG companies claim that the move hurt their competitiveness in export markets. The lawsuit seeks over $390,000 in financial damages, but experts say the amount of compensation may rise much higher depending on the amount of losses. If the airline companies are found guilty, many other exporters could bring about similar suits. Korea's Supreme Court recently ruled that penalties were rightly imposed on airline companies that collude to fix airfares. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
Now, the nation's consumer inflation grew at its fastest rate in over a year and a half in May. Statistics Korea says the consumer price index spiked 1.7% from a year earlier, and officials attribute the rise to a low base effect, saying agricultural products saw a steep decline in the same month last year. The price index, excluding items that are vulnerable to external uncertainties like agricultural and petroleum products, rose 2.2% on year, and this is still below the central bank's target inflation rate of 2.5% to 3.5%. Now, prices of electricity and water jumped more than 4% on year, while agricultural and fisheries products prices edged down 2%.
All of the day's important events close to home and around the world. Join Moon Gon-yong live from Seoul.
Mobile shopping market for the dual use of the Korean name East Sea and Japanese name Sea of Japan in school textbooks in the state of Virginia. The chatter over a resumption of the six-party talks on North Korea's nuclear program has picked up in recent weeks. But the chief nuclear envoys of South Korea and the U.S. during their talks in Washington agree the dialogue with Pyongyang will only begin once that regime shows it is ready to freeze its nuclear program. Our correspondent Hwang Sang-hee has more.
South Korea and the United States agreed North Korea must not advance its nuclear capability if it seeks dialogue with them. Following 4 hours of talks in Washington on Monday local time, South Korea's chief nuclear envoy Hwang Jung-guk and his U.S. counterpart Lynn Davies set a condition for the resumption of six-nation talks aimed at denuclearizing North Korea.
On resuming denuclearization talks, we agreed it must be a meaningful dialogue that ensures actual progress and prevents further development of North Korea's nuclear capacity.
The meeting comes a week after Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi's visit to Seoul, where he called for a swift resumption of the six-party talks. The multilateral denuclearization dialogue involving the two Koreas, the U.S., China, Japan, and Russia, has been stalled since December 2008. Hwang said Seoul and Washington agreed North Korea's sincerity about denuclearization is the key precondition to resuming the six-party talks, and they will seek close consultation with Beijing on the issue. South Korea and the United States also called on Japan to maintain transparency in its discussions with North Korea. Pyongyang agreed last week to allow a reinvestigation into the fate of Japanese citizens abducted by the North in the 1970s and 80s, and Tokyo promised to lift some of its sanctions on the North. Experts say dialogue between North Korea and Japan is key for solving the abduction issue, but stress Tokyo must not stray away from its trilateral cooperation with Seoul and Washington in dealing with Pyongyang's nuclear ambitions. Hwang Sang-hee, ARIRANG News.
A former U.S. official says sanctions slapped on North Korea for its nuclear missile activities don't really have the desired effect. While speaking at the Center for Strategic and International Studies Monday, former U.S. National Security Advisor Tom Donilon said North Korea's isolated financial system means U.S. dollar sanctions don't do that much to damage the reclusive state. Now, he contrasted the situation in North Korea to Iran, which has a financial system that's closely interconnected internationally and also has a huge petroleum trade system. And the top commander for U.S. forces in Korea has asked Washington to deploy an advanced American missile defense system in Korea. He was speaking at a lecture in Seoul on Tuesday, and General Curtis Scaparrotti said that he recommended the Pentagon send the system known as the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense, or THAAD, to Korea. Now, earlier media reports said that Washington had conducted a site survey for possible deployment locations for its THAAD system, which is designed to intercept a diverse range of missiles. Scaparrotti said that the recommendation is in the initial stages of consideration and that a final decision will come after close discussions between the two allies. And a former senior U.S. State Department official has endorsed Tokyo's push to exercise collective self-defense, citing growing security threats posed by China and North Korea in the Asia-Pacific region. Now, meeting with Japanese officials and the ruling coalition in Tokyo, former U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for East Asia Kirk Campbell said Washington believes individual self-defense and police authority are not enough to handle new forms of threat in this region. The right to collective self-defense allows a country to take a military action if an ally is attacked. Now, Campbell stressed that the U.S. needs to boost defense ties with its two major allies, South Korea and Japan, whose bilateral relations remain strained over Tokyo's historic denials. The Obama administration has announced an ambitious plan to significantly reduce carbon emissions in the U.S. plant sector. Now, supporters of the plan say it will give Washington greater leverage to push countries like China and India to do more to fight climate change. But there are those who oppose this plan as well. Our Choo-sun reports.
But today, EPA is proposing a clean power plan that will cut carbon pollution from our power sector by using clean energy sources and cutting energy waste.
The Obama administration's new plan requires America's 1,000 power plants to reduce their carbon dioxide emissions to 30% of 2005 levels by the year 2030. Nearly 2/5 of electricity in the U.S. is generated by coal-fueled plants. Each U.S. state has a number of ways to achieve this, they can increase their power plants' heat rates, rely more on natural gas or other sources for energy, and raise energy efficiency. The Environmental Protection Agency says more than $90 billion of climate and health-related costs will be saved from the plan, and up to 150,000 asthma attacks in children and over 3,000 heart attacks could be prevented.
Often these illnesses are aggravated by air pollution. Pollution from the same sources that release carbon and contribute to climate change. We've got to do more to reduce it.
Despite the government's assurances that the new rules will bring down electricity bills by 8% and encourage investment in new technologies, business groups and lawmakers from coal-reliant states oppose the initiative.
The administration has set out to kill coal and its 800,000 jobs. If it succeeds in death by regulation, we'll all be paying a lot more money for electricity.
After a period of public comment, the regulations will be finalized in June of next year, after which states can submit their own carbon reduction plans. Choi Yu-sun, ARIRANG News.
Now on to some huge tech news. Apple has unveiled a new mobile operating system for its iPhone and iPad, calling it the company's biggest release since the launch of its App Store. Now, iOS 8 was showcased at the Apple's Worldwide Developers Conference in San Francisco on Monday. And some of its features include the ability to control iPhones from other Apple devices and Health Kit, which is a function in which data on a user's health conditions are recorded. Now, Apple says the iOS 8 will be available sometime this fall, along with Yosemite, a new operating system for its Mac computers. Not so long from now, you may be able to control your computers or smartphones with your hands. Local scientists here in Korea developed a new technology they believe could change the way we interact with our devices. Kim Min-ji reports.
By simply clenching your fist, then opening it again, you can control screens of computers or televisions. The selected screen moves when you clench your fist and move it up and down. When clenched, the watch is on. When released, it is off. This is what's known as wearable gesture technology, which works off the movement of wrist muscles. Researchers say the technology is more advanced than the current wearable devices on the market, and it allows users to answer phone calls and control volume with a simple clench of the fist.
Using infrared telecommunications, the technology senses the movement of the wrist muscle and converts the gesture into an order to control the contents.
When the user is wearing the watch, they can control and communicate with nearby smart devices. As the technology recognizes the movement of wrist muscles and does not depend on a camera, it can be used anywhere at any time. By adding authentication functions, researchers believe that users will eventually be able to open the doors to their cars or even their homes.
Because the technology recognizes the movement of the hand, we believe that it is the right technology to adopt in smartbands or in other smart devices being developed now.
The wearable tech market is expected to be worth some $500 million by 2018. The research team plans to gain an upper hand in the market by creating technology that can change formation and is easy to attach to or detach from the body. Kim Min-ji, ARIRANG News.
Now, Brazil had more than 6 years to prepare for next month's World Cup, or this month's World Cup, but with 10 days left before the global event kicks off, the nation is far from ready. A Brazilian daily reports that only half of the 167 infrastructure projects promised for the international event has been finished. Now, that includes the Arena Corinthians in Sao Paulo, which will be the venue for the World Cup's opening match on June 12th. Safety setbacks, budget problems, and heavy rain have all been blamed for the lack of progress. And Brazil's sports ministry is downplaying the reports of unfinished stadiums, saying the games will not be affected. And now it's time for our daily arts and culture segment. And of course, our Im Yoon-hee joins me live in the studio. And today she has brought us some performances for the entire family to enjoy. So let's get right to it. Good afternoon to you, Yoon-hee.
Good afternoon.
So what does a family-friendly performance entail?
Right, so this is a performance that is fun for the children to watch, but better yet, it actually teaches them a lesson. Now, in that industry, there are not too many performances dedicated only for children, but the ones that are good for the whole family to get out there together. Now let's take a look.
Baby bear Frankie lives in a fairy tale land with his goblin friends. But one day they run into sweet bread that's very bad for your health. So they learn to leave the bread and continue on their journey. Based on a popular TV show, Frankie comes alive on the stage in the musical Frankie and His Friends. This musical teaches a lesson on the dangers of bad eating habits, and it also teaches the audience how to eat a healthy and complete diet with the help of the lovable bear Frankie.
We wanted to create something at the eye level of children, something they can learn from. The message we want to send is something that's easily understood and applied.
At the same theater is another type of performance, one that attracts audience members from all over the world. It's the traditional Korean musical Miso Baby Jangcheon, and it's just as popular as ever. The performance takes place in the Joseon Dynasty and incorporates comedy along with Korean traditions. The result is an entertaining performance that takes the audience back in time for a glimpse into the culture and traditions of Korea. And finally, for the parents, is a performance based on a popular French novella, Oscar and the Lady in Pink. This stage adaptation stars 72-year-old actress Kim Hye-ja, who plays 11 different roles in a story about a 10-year-old boy battling leukemia. It's a play that deals with life and death and touches the hearts of both the actors and the audience.
You know, the issue of life and death, it's something that we all have to deal with. But, you know, I think for the younger generation, it's a little bit hard or difficult to cope with that when faced with a death in the family or friends or whatnot. Tell us a little bit about how this could be actually a family-friendly play.
Right, so this performance, the actress, she actually plays all 11 roles. So she plays the role of the Oscar, the boy suffering the illness. She plays the role of the grandmother. And so by her playing all these roles, you know, you really can identify her as a different member of the family. But she really does pour out all her emotions into this performance. It's very heartfelt, very heartstrung, and especially as of late, she said she was really influenced by the whole Seoul ferry accident. And she said that she, as a person, cannot part herself from this character's role, and so you can see her passion and her emotions in this performance.
Right, because you know, she's actually a very popular, legendary actress here in Korea, Kim Hye-ja, and also she is, I'm sure, a grandmother, a mother herself. So I'm sure she can really identify herself with this role. It's a really emotional play. Now let's go back to the first musical, the one for children. How does it teach children healthy eating habits, you say?
Right, it's very interesting, right? So it's a fun musical for them to see, but it stars as Frankie the bear, who is a character that children are very familiar with and can identify with. So children learn by example, and so they see this bear and his friends, they see him making these choices between, you know, good food, bad food. So they really learn through example by the show, and they make new friends, and it's a fun time for the whole family.
Well, tomorrow is actually people have a day off for the election, so perhaps after voting, the family could go all out and check these performances out. So definitely a good report for us today. We'll take a break for tomorrow for election day, and we will see you on Thursday.
See you then.
Now, rain is blanketing the nation today. Although there was heavy rain in the central region this morning, it's turned to a drizzle and will completely stop later this afternoon. Now, for those of you in the Chungcheongnam-do province and Jeju Island, the rain is coming down hard right now, although it will clear up by tomorrow morning in the time for the voting day. Now, the clouds are actually there in the remaining. Now, with this rain, we have this quite a temperature drops even lower than yesterday, putting the highs mostly in the low 20s, which will go back up again in the later week. Now, going over to our temperature readings, Seoul will top out at 25 this afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Gwangju and Busan will peak up to 22 and 24 degrees. Now, moving over to other regions, Jeju Island tops out at 23, Dokdo at 24, while Mankungang tops out at 19. Well, that's all for now. I'm Michelle Park, and back to you, Kanya.
Well, thank you, Michelle, for that, and thank you for watching. That's just about all from me at this hour. I'm Moon Geun-hye, but check back with us at 4 p.m. Korea time for Business Today.